You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday 20th of August 2014. Birmingham Tesco Free Gaza demonstrator denies 5 assault charges. The kosher controversy at Sainsbury's speaks to a profound problem. Acquiescence to anti-Semitism, or is it Islamic control? France, Saudi prince's convoy in Paris attacked by gunmen. More immigrants than ever coming to Denmark. Muslim engineer banned from French nuclear sites. Chaldean Archbishop of Mosul warns Islam does not say that all men are equal. You Western Christians will also suffer in the near future. ISIS forcefully circumcised Syrian Christian men in Mosul and sold 700 Yazidi women. Pope okays protecting Iraq minorities, wants UN OK. Thought for the day, the world of crud. And finally, 2 for 1 day Wednesday. UK News. Birmingham Tesco Free Gaza demonstrator denies 5 assault charges. Naveed Safir appeared at Birmingham Magistrates Court charged following the disorder on Saturday. A protester who took part in a Free Gaza demonstration at a Tesco supermarket in Birmingham has appeared before magistrates to deny 5 assault charges. Naveed Safir, 35 of Naseby Road, Alum Rock, was charged following the disorder on Saturday. Appearing at Birmingham Magistrates Court, Mr Safar denied 3 charges of assaulting a police officer in execution of their duty. He also pleaded not guilty over 2 assault charges against members of the public and a charge of obstructing an officer. World date. These bastards always plead not guilty, which costs us more in legal aid and court fees. The plods never advise them to plead guilty, do they? Might infringe their human rights. These arrests are pure nonsense. The kosher controversy at Sainsbury's speaks to a profound problem, acquiescence to anti-Semitism. Brendan O'Neill, writing in blog for The Telegraph, asks, were you outraged by a Sainsbury's store decision over the weekend to hide away its kosher foods in an attempt to placate anti-Israel protesters? You should have been. For this incident, though seemingly a one-off, speaks to a profound problem in Europe today. The respectable class's acquiescence to anti-Semitism, their willingness to accept anti-Semitic sentiment as a fact of life and to shrug it off, or worse, kowtow to it. World Date says no, Brendan, it's not necessarily anti-Semitism, it is simply the lack of will and mental laziness of the British people to stand up to the very vocal and vehement Muslim minority who are trying to take over this country. European news. France, Saudi prince's convoy in Paris attacked by gunmen. Heavily armed men have attacked a convoy of cars belonging to a Saudi prince, stealing €250,000, police say. The convoy was heading through the northern Paris on its way to Le Bourget airport late on Sunday evening when it was raided. The gunmen seized a vehicle carrying the money and documents, later releasing the driver and 2 others. The convoy was said to have come from the Saudi embassy. No one was hurt. The gunmen, reportedly armed with Kalashnikov rifles, targeted a Mercedes minivan at 21:15 on the northern ring road or Périphérique at Port-la-Chapelle on the edge of Paris. World date, good for them. More immigrants than ever coming to Denmark. Never before have so many foreign citizens moved to Denmark as now, according to a new report from the National Stats Keepers, Danmark Statistik. Within the last year, 59,274 foreigners, hailing mostly from Europe, have arrived in Denmark. Romania leads the way with 4,919, followed by Poland, 4,376, while the greatest increase comes from the war-torn Syria, 2,500 figures revealed. In particular, they are coming from EU nations, Bent Grave, society researcher from Roskilde University, told Metro Express newspaper. World date. They are leaving off the huge amounts that merely come through EU countries as we have. They are all shapes, sizes, colours and ethnicity other than pure European. Concentrate on these ones. These are the danger. Muslim engineer banned from French nuclear site. A Muslim engineer working for a firm subcontracted by French energy giant EDF has been banned from accessing French nuclear sites where he normally works, a move his lawyer says is pure Islamophobia. The 29-year-old project manager has been granted access to nuclear installations as part of his job throughout 2012 and 2013. But in March 2014, the engineer, who cannot be named according to French law, has had his pass to enter the Nogent-sur-Seine nuclear power station revoked without explanation. The decision made by the local administration was covered by secret defence, which means the authorities are not required to publicly justify that decision. As far as the lawyer is concerned, considering the current atmosphere in France, his religious leanings cannot be ruled out as a reason behind the ban. In June 2014, Gers successfully had the engineer's ban revoked by an appeals court. The judge ruled that there were serious doubts over the legality of the decision, but when the engineer turned up for work in July, he found he was once again refused access, this time by EDF, to his place of work. World at 8. It should have been hammered home by now. Do not trust a Muslim who is an engineer or who can fly a plane. Simple, isn't it? Too late after a nuclear event to form a committee to find out why or how it happened, innit? World News. Chaldean Archbishop of Mosul warns Islam does not say that all men are equal, and you Western Christians will also suffer in the near future. The Chaldean Catholic Church is an Eastern Rite church under the authority of Pope Francis. In an interview with the Corriere della Sera, Archbishop Amel Nona, now living in exile in Erbil in Kurdistan, Iraq, commented on his diocese in Mosul being overrun by radical Islamists. Our sufferings today are the prelude of those that you, Europeans and Western Christians, will also suffer in the near future, said the Archbishop. I lost my diocese. The physical setting of my apostolate has been occupied by Islamic radicals who want us converted or dead. But my community is still alive. Please try to understand us, he said. Your liberal and democratic principles are worth nothing here. You must consider again our reality in the Middle East, because you are welcoming in your countries an ever-growing number of Muslims. Also, you are in danger, said the Archbishop. You must take strong and courageous decisions, even at the cost of contradicting your principles. You think all men are equal, but that is not true. Islam does not say that all men are equal, said Archbishop Nona. Your values are not their values. If you do not understand this soon enough, you will become the victims of the enemy you have welcomed in your home. World at 8. Words of truth from a brave man. The West will never listen. It prides itself too much on the diversity and multi-religious mantras to ever stand up to Islam. On a slightly off-topic note, we put up the container people in an old church. None of them are Christian. See my point? ISIS forcibly circumcised Assyrian Christian men in Mosul and sold 700 Yazidi women. The Tunisia Daily is reporting that the Islamic State, ISIS, forcibly circumcised Assyrian men in Mosul without anaesthesia. The report does not specify the number of men that were affected, but does state that it was an organised mass circumcision. ISIS has ordered the circumcision of all Christian children and adults who remain in Mosul. Very few Assyrian Christians stayed in Mosul after ISIS gave them a deadline to convert, pay jizya, leave or die. The report also states that ISIS sold 700 Yazidi women for $150 each in a public slave auction in Mosul. World at 8. Only Islam can get away with that. If the poor bloody Christian Serbs had done that, many would still be alive today instead of being blamed for what was only holding on to their land. Pope okays protecting Iraq minorities, wants UN to okay. Pope Francis on Monday said efforts to stop Islamic militants from attacking religious minorities in Iraq are legitimate, but said that international community, and not just one country, should decide on how to intervene. Francis was asked if he approved of the unilateral US airstrikes on militants of the Islamic State group who have captured swathes of northern and western Iraq and northeastern Syria and have forced minority Christians and others to either convert to Islam or flee their homes, or of course be executed. In these cases where there is an unjust aggression, I can only say that it is licit to stop the unjust aggressor, Francis said. I understand the verb stop. I'm not saying bomb or make war, just stop. And the means that can be used to stop them must be evaluated. When the Vatican's ambassador to Iraq, Monsignor Giorgio Lingua, was asked about the US airstrikes, he told Vatican Radio that it was unfortunate that the situation had gotten to this point, but it's good when you're able to, at the very least, remove weapons from these people who have no scruples. The Vatican's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, Archbishop Silvano Tomasi, went further saying maybe military action is necessary at this moment. World at 8. Well, protecting the Christian churches used to be the duty of the Pope and his army in days of old. Thought for the day: the world of crud. You listen to the news, read the newspapers and journals, and immediately you are in a world of crud. And by crud I mean crud with a capital C. Do Brits really think that they are descended from African slaves who came over here in the 16th century? Do they really think that their small North Sea island has been harbouring millions of migrants for the last 4 centuries who have just popped up during the last 50 years? Do they really think that our green and pleasant land is no longer that owing to just the march of time and progress? Do they really think that when a town or village changes its appearance, both building wise and inhabitants wise, that that is a good thing to be applauded? Do they think that when a huge tunnel is built under the Channel or a high-speed railway is being built halfway round the UK, that this is for their own good? Are they that dumb? Really? It's no wonder that many people just switch off the national news because it waves around like a floundering beached fish around so many subjects. On one day, off the next, supported one day and vilified the next. If one was a thinking man, one would take a rope and bloody hang oneself on the odd occasion, wouldn't one? Hypocritical is the word I'm searching for, and a grand word that is. I personally hate hypocrites and liars. Not that I've never been both, but not often and not together, which is something these hateful, misleading and hypocritical media-led programmes are about. If a Tonight programme shows anything that might be interesting to a nationalist, like immigration, the EU, Islam in the UK, or anything that really could be informative to the masses or blurbs, you can bet it usually isn't. Carefully chosen scenes, even more carefully chosen people, and very carefully chosen subjects abound. The last one, about cooking, or rather the lack of it, showed a black one parent of 3 in a high-rise being taught to put chicken bits in a dish and put them in the oven. I thought I'd gone mad for a minute, then I realised that in doing this, the channel are including the ethnics, the disadvantaged, and in some ways the retards of this country all in one package. Ridiculous and demeaning. One of the main gripes I have with the media is that they never state the obvious or get to the root of the matter or problem presented. Vis-a-vis the container load of Asians and the fact they were found in a bad state. Everyone, including the soddy news presenter and the plods on the spot, seemed to be worried over the state of the inhabitants of that container. As if something new. For years, since the channel was built, that's how a vast majority of our illegals have come into the country. In fact, it's a game over in France to see who makes it. It's well known, my opinion, of people who, for the most part, leave their own countries and come to ours. Gone are the days of the true asylum seekers, because the whole of the Middle East, most of the Far East and all of Africa are in one sort of a war or tribal gangbang all the time, so where does it stop? Despite all the revolting public relations exercises going on all the time, telling the blurbs that it's okay and fairly indigenous peoples will benefit, the sad and true fact is that we are not benefiting at all from immigration into this country. The government and indeed successive governments have and are letting criminals not only into this country but allowing them to stay on the Brussels bit of ridiculousness of the right to a family life. Over 1,000 foreign criminals, on official figures which you can of course double because it's not known exactly how many illegal criminals live over here, have not been deported. Our governments should never have signed up to the Human Rights Act anyway. Many other countries did not, and laugh at the way in which we Brits kowtow to Brussels at the same time we hate doing so. Back to the container. I don't care about the inhabitants of this container or any other. I don't care if they die, and I'm not being a hypocrite here, but totally honest. My thought is for our plods to do something useful and find the bastards that cash in on these people and bring them over to this country. They should be shot. As for the people and the Sikh dying, I'm wondering why, when apparently getting threats from Muslims in Afghanistan, he didn't move down to a Sikh enclave in India. Why come over here? Well, to join the already hefty community in the UK probably. Now his wife and 2 sons are here, and we all know what that means. Free education, free healthcare, free housing, benefits and a sympathetic community to join, and probably remarry and produce yet more little Sikhs. And of course we have the lovely possibility that in the future our Sikh and Muslim communities will fall out, as will the West Indian and African ones, the Russian and the Polish ones, and it goes on until this country will be a third world state and in a third world state. It doesn't end with one container load of human misery being transported into another country, which is and will be full of human misery, just not our own. What is it about the simple fact that humans breed? Well, the ethnics do anyway, and it is the simple maths that one male coming in is more than capable of breeding his way into the Guinness Book of Outbreeding Stats. And we are still burbling on about the health of these people and helping them do it. All the foreigners coming in do not stay in their own countries and breed there to help that country survive. They come here or Europe, and why? Shekels is what makes immigrants go round, so to speak. Every single one in the last 60 years has bred children. Everyone has had some form of benefit in coming here, whether that be health, money, jobs or education. And my point being, for every single one, they've taken it from you and your progeny, and the migrants' benefits, legal fees, prison, whatever, have all come out of the taxpayers' hard-earned money. According to the establishment, we should all welcome this form of theft and bribery, but I don't. I also know if the average migrant, past, present and future, did not gain in some way from coming here, they simply would not come. They all have countries that need help and attention, preferably from their own people. So taking the news at base level, Mr. Plod is saying his first concern was the health of the occupants, whereas I was hoping they were all dead. This would avoid a lot of problems in the future. As we're banning all air flights from Africa and indeed parts of the continent because of Ebola, and the fact that at the moment, even in our capital city, there are thousands of Africans in already over the past months, and no one knows what state of health they're in anyway. And the media will never tell the truth because of course it would fan racial hatred or cause mob rule in cities, all of which the authorities are frantically trying to avoid happening. This is like putting a cork in a fizzy bottle of booze. It will pop one day or another at the first chance it gets. And we might be treated to, as of a few years ago, a presenter calmly commenting on black looters whilst the plods looked even more calmly on. And the media was full of an Asian guy getting mugged by a white guy, not the thousands of crimes that were committed by our own black and mixed race ghettos. It is this ignorance of possibilities that worries me. I may be a misery monger, but if you acknowledge a problem could and does exist, then the possibilities of handling it are good. If you don't, and you hide your head in the sand, then something comes up and pokes you up the arse. It was the same with the Gurkhas. Everyone in the news went ah at the sight of an elderly shrivelled fighting man in a wheelchair being pushed around by Lumley, and yet, nowadays, the only shrivelled old Nepalese I see are walking around the shops by the lorry load, buying nothing and going back to the houses that for the most part you and I have provided them with. Down south, parts of our towns look like Nepal on a very bad day. You see, nothing stays the same ever, certainly not regarding foreigners in this country. The first thing you'll hear out of all the poor buggers stuck in Iraq persecuted from the western-backed democratic Islamist jihadists, which is an oxymoron in itself, is we will go anywhere, the UK or the US. Oh my God, more of them. I do care that these people are tragically suffering, but I don't expect my country to have to suffer in the long term for them as well. We already have the French pushing over the West Africans and North Africans by the bushel, and there is a vast empire of bloody-minded and wicked people taking money from these people to allow them to enter container world and come through the channel. Many more are paying for false passports and papers to fly in, and in fact our borders are the most lax in the world. It does seem odd in a country where you cannot fly out if British or English unless you practically strip off in the airport and have all your worldly goods on show, and yet millions of people can come into this country and stay without even so much as a health check or buy your leave. Now you can see why I am angry. That the most propagandised TV in the world is not being used to its full advantage, whilst the web is being used for perverts, lazy armchair politicians, people who love cruelty to humans and animals, and to service retards who don't want to walk around shops. Angry, practically seething. And yet another article came my way in Hello in the Doctor's Surgery. It was on Mr Bell Harry, who got the VC a few years ago for bravery. And I'm not decrying his bravery, just the publication of a sickening article showing him and his wife and baby on a lovely return holiday to the West Indies from whence he came in 1999. Now, as I say, I'm not demeaning this guy's acts of bravery, but many of our own white soldiers have lost legs and been awarded medals, but for them no holiday or desk job with the army on the PR side, but a hovel or a shop doorway, and that is that. Rules and publicity should be equal under the Equal Rights Brigade, shouldn't it? But you and I know it isn't, and this is going to get worse and worse. Already we are an ethnic minority in our own country in many places, and we have no place to run and no place to hide. Not like container people. They can go back to their countries. We cannot. We are already in ours, and it is fast becoming theirs. That is why I'm angry, because the one machine, the media, that should be used to inform the public is not being used to that specific purpose. It is being used to cover up, to mislead and to misinform, and that is wicked when an entire country and its people are virtually being taken over by stealth and diversity. So while the rest of the world is busy offloading its poor, ill and greedy peoples into Europe, and the Middle East is now a cauldron of hate and ignorance, UK media are busy fiddling whilst London burns, metaphorically at the moment. I hate hypocrites and liars, and we have a plethora of both, which makes it so easy for foreigners to just come on down. And finally, 2 for 1 Day Wednesday. The meaning of a plum, or in short, class. His lordship was in the study when the butler approached and coughed discreetly. "May I ask you a question, my lord?" "Go ahead, Carson," said his lordship. "I'm doing the crossword in the Times, and I found a word that I'm not too clear on." "What word is that?" asked his lordship. "A plum, my lord." "Now that's a very difficult one to explain. I would say it is self-assurance or a complete composure." "Thank you, my lord, but I'm still a little confused." "Let me give you an example to make it clearer. Do you remember a few months ago when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge arrived to spend a weekend with us?" "I remember the occasion very well, my lord. It gave the staff and myself much pleasure to look after them." "Also," continued the Earl of Grantham, "do you remember when Wills plucked a rose for Kate in the rose garden?" "I was present on that occasion, my lord, ministering to their needs." "Whilst plucking the rose, a thorn embedded itself in his thumb very deeply. I witnessed the incident, my lord, and saw the Duchess herself remove the thorn and bandage his thumb with her own dainty handkerchief. That evening the hole that the rose made on his thumb was very sore. Kate had to cut up his venison, even though it was extremely tender." "Yes, my lord, I did see everything that transpired that evening." "The next morning, while you were pouring coffee for her ladyship, Kate inquired of Wills with a loud voice, 'Darling, does your prick still throb?' And you, Carson, did not spill one drop of coffee. That is a plum." And to finish, a little guy is sitting at the bar just staring at his drink for half an hour when this big trouble-making biker steps up next to him, grabs his drink and gulps it down in one swig. The poor little guy starts crying. "Come on, man, I was just giving you a hard time," the biker says. "I didn't think you'd cry. I can't stand to see a man crying." "This is the worst day of my life," says the little guy in between sobs. "I can't do anything right. I overslept and was late to an important meeting, so my boss fired me. When I went to the parking lot I found my car was stolen and I don't have any insurance. I left my wallet in the cab I took home. I found my wife in bed with the gardener and then my dog bit me. So I came to this bar trying to work up the courage to put an end to my life. And then you show up and drink my poison." You've been listening to The World at 8. We at Radio Britain are taking a short sabbatical and will be back early September. I am Lynne Mozart and I wish you all a very good night and a very good bank holiday. See you soon. Chaldean Archbishop of Mosul warns Islam does not say that all men are equal. You Western Christians will also suffer in the near future. ISIS forcefully circumcised Syrian Christian men in Mosul and sold 700 Yazidi women. Pope okays protecting Iraq minorities, wants UN OK. Thought for the day, the world of crud. And finally, 2 for 1 day Wednesday. UK News. Birmingham Tesco Free Gaza demonstrator denies 5 assault charges. Naveed Safir appeared at Birmingham Magistrates Court charged following the disorder on Saturday. A protester who took part in a Free Gaza demonstration at a Tesco supermarket in Birmingham has appeared before magistrates to deny 5 assault charges. Heavily armed men have attacked a convoy of cars belonging to a Saudi prince, stealing €250,000, police say. The convoy was heading through the northern Paris on its way to Le Bourget airport late on Sunday evening when it was raided. The gunmen seized a vehicle carrying the money and documents, later releasing the driver and 2 others. The convoy was said to have come from the Saudi embassy. No one was hurt. The gunmen, reportedly armed with Kalashnikov rifles, targeted a Mercedes minivan at 21:15 on the northern ring road or Périphérique at Port-la-Chapelle on the edge of Paris. World at 8, good for them. More immigrants than ever coming to Denmark. Never before have so many foreign citizens moved to Denmark as now, according to a new report from the National Stats Keepers, charges. Naveed Safir, 35 of Naseby Road, Alum Rock, was charged following the disorder on Saturday. Appearing at Birmingham Magistrates Court, Mr Safar denied 3 charges of assaulting a police officer in execution of their duty. He also pleaded not guilty over 2 assault charges against members of the public and a charge of obstructing an officer. World date. These bastards always plead not guilty, which costs us more in legal aid and court fees. The plods never advise them to plead guilty, do they? Might infringe their human rights. These arrests are pure nonsense. The kosher controversy at Sainsbury's speaks to an profound problem, acquiescence to anti-Semitism. Brendan O'Neill, writing in blog for The Telegraph, asks, were you outraged by a Sainsbury's store decision over the weekend to hide away its kosher foods in an attempt to placate anti-Israel protesters? You should have been. For this incident, though seemingly a one-off, speaks to a profound problem in Europe today. The respectable class's acquiescence to anti-Semitism, their willingness to accept anti-Semitic sentiment as a fact of life and to shrug it off, or worse, kowtow to it. World at 8 says no, Brendan, it's not necessarily anti-Semitism, it is simply the lack of will and mental laziness of the British people to stand up to the very vocal and vehement Muslim minority who are trying to take over this country. European news. France, Saudi prince's convoy in Paris attacked by gunmen.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the #1 in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday 20th of August 2014. Birmingham Tesco Free Gaza demonstrator denies 5 assault charges. The kosher controversy at Sainsbury's speaks to a profound problem, acquiescence to anti-Semitism, or is it Islamic control? France, Saudi prince's convoy in Paris attacked by gunmen. More immigrants than ever coming to Denmark. Muslim engineer banned from French nuclear site.